Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on data orchestration, providing the single source of truth on your customer. I'm Megan Winnery, Senior Demand Gen Manager at Tealium, and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 30 minutes and will be recorded. The slides in the recording will be made available at the end, and there are also some related resources in the attachments and links section that you're able to view during or after the webinar. And we want to hear your questions, so please use the Q&A feature to submit them. And for any questions that we aren't able to answer live, we'll follow up with you after the webinar is over. All right, on to today's presenter. We're fortunate enough to have Elizabeth Marshall with us today. Elizabeth is a passionate and well-versed technical solutions consultant with over 10 years experience in the digital space. She is currently the Senior Solutions Consulting Manager at Tealium, where she supports today's top brands in unifying their customer data to better connect with their audiences. All right, and now for today's presentation, Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you, Megan, for the introduction, and thank you guys for signing up for today's webinar. I'm really excited to be leading this discussion. There's so much that we're going to be covering, a lot of new concepts and a lot of explanations on existing ones you may be familiar with. The way that I wanted to break the conversation today was really into three main parts. We're first going to help you understand the MarTech landscape and the challenges that come as a result, and then getting into this concept of a data supply chain and helping you as an organization understand what technologies and tool sets are necessary and how identity resolution plays a key part in that supply chain process. Now, we're going to round out the conversation going into more detail around data orchestration, what it is, how it helps you as an organization drive those in-the-moment customer experiences that we're all searching for, and how it's different from campaign orchestration. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the problems today in the current MarTech landscape and the challenges for you guys as a result. So over the last 5 or 6 years, the number of technologies available for customer experience or marketing has really grown about 30 times. Any marketer who's tried to create experiences across one or more of these technologies knows the pain that this creates, and I think we're all familiar with this Lumascape slide. So with more tools than ever, we also at the same time have an explosion of data sources. And these data sources are generating more data for you as an organization to utilize. And so when we think about it, all of the pain should be worth it because we're delivering better experiences, right? And our customers are getting happier. Well, unfortunately, no. Customers really aren't getting happier because expectations that they have are going up. And inconsistency from an organization is punished harshly, even though customers are really willing to pay more for those improved experiences. And we really owe a lot of this to organizations that are using their data strategically, such as Amazon or Apple or Uber, etc. Now, you also have to consider that we are on the precipice of change. 89% of surveyed Americans are avoiding companies that they don't believe are protecting their data. So the industry is really helping to drive this change with an increased focus on data governance issues. And we're seeing that across these main points here. Consumers are demanding protection, with the things of increased use of ad blockers. Providers are really protecting their gardens, so being able to disable third-party cookies. Governments are introducing changes. I think everybody who signed up for this webinar today may have heard of GDPR in some capacity or another. And lastly, businesses are protecting their privacy. There's newly created roles within the organization to help really manage data and the privacy and looking at the practices of how data is being utilized. Now, throughout all of this, you really have to consider the technical realities that exist. This growing technology landscape and the increase in data sources or experiences, all while maintaining data governance, is really not easy to manage, and it leads to data fragmentation. And this slide really indicates what it's like for marketers or organizations to integrate a lot of these solutions, right? It's a lot of point-to-point integrations, and ultimately this leads to data fragmentation. This data fragmentation is not only occurring just across vendors, but as a result, it domino effects or dominoes across teams and channels as well. where these vendors are only really caring about their view of the data, which is tied to a specific customer stage or KPI. And the same holds true for different channels and teams as well. And so when we think about that, the end result or the end loser in this scenario is really the customer. The customers are being presented with these disconnected experiences as a result of this fragmented data and disconnected companies. Now, the one thing that's really interesting to note is this concept of the data supply chain that we talked about earlier is really inferred but not defined. Everybody in the space is building these beautiful architecture diagrams, but nobody's really thinking about the underlying data connectivity, the orchestration of the data across the stack. And that's really what we're here to talk about. The orchestration is fundamental and foundational to everything. So now that we've laid out how we got to this point and the challenges, let's go ahead and dive into what modern organizations are going to do. So the data supply chain to the rescue. Now, as an organization, this may sound very familiar, and this is the expectation that you have from your customers to create 360-degree views, to deploy cross-channel experiences in order to capture users in the moment while maintaining data governance. But again, with every organization on a quest to achieve this, what do organizations need to actually do or have in place to make this a reality? This is where you have to establish the end-to-end data supply chain. Organizations are able to establish this supply chain when they consider the following capabilities: the collection, the transformation, the enrichment, and the syndication of data. And the act of these capabilities together equate to data orchestration. This is a term that we are going to use throughout our presentation today. And when you achieve data orchestration, you will achieve in-the-moment data on all devices across all channels and technologies. And this is what's key to help driving the best possible experience for the visitor and satisfying those growing expectations that we talked about earlier. And one thing you'll notice is even though we're focused on improving customer experience to this point, we haven't really talked specifically about campaigns, but rather the data that helps you as an organization drive those campaigns. And this is where we need to shift our mindset to really separate that data from campaign activation. So with that said, it would be helpful for you to understand what technologies and more importantly, the tool sets are necessary for you as a modern organization to enable this supply chain. So first we have to consider within the customer journey, the digital experiences. And these digital experiences are generating events, and you need a client-side event management solution. Typically, this is going to be your tag manager. And these solutions are going to be designed to be able to handle and integrate data from all digital experiences client side. So this could be things like your desktop computers, your mobile web, your native mobile apps, etc. From there, the data is sent out to vendors in your stack via JavaScript tags. So if you're a marketer on today's call, think about implementing vendors like Google and their floodlight tags, basically sending them the event level data. Now, however, it's really important to note that your customers are not just interacting digitally. Their offline interactions are generating event data that's really valuable for you as an organization to utilize to improve the customer experience. Think about it around things like your call center generating data, your in-store point of sale generating data, your CRM generating data, all things that are offline but pertinent to that individual's user experience. So what we need here is a server-side event management solution. And typically these are your API gateways, and these handle and integrate all of the data from the offline experiences or online experiences and send that data out to vendors in your stack via APIs. So if you're an analytics owner on the call today, think about the ability to stream all of this online and offline event level data directly into a big data system like Amazon Kinesis in real time, or removing multiple SDKs from your mobile app. This is all made possible when you have a client and server-side solution in place. Now, organizations really need to then take the event level data and further enrich it to understand who that person is. How can we provide those amazing experiences if we don't know who that individual is? So, this is really where you need to consider visitor profiling and identity resolution. Typically, these are your customer data platforms, or in some cases, your CRM or DMP, that needs to take the event data from both sources, the digital and offline experiences, and narrow in on building those individual profiles. Now, the identity resolution is something that we're going to talk about in more detail later on. The last piece really is considering the storage and reporting on the event and visitor level data. And really, the purpose of that is so you can get business intelligence out of it. And that business intelligence is going to help you inform those in the moment experiences, right? It's going to provide those insights for your organizations to utilize to constantly improve. And all of these technologies coming together becomes a virtuous cycle, helping to complete that data supply chain that we've been talking about and reduce data fragmentation, resulting in those siloed experiences for customers and internal teams. So, to quickly recap, because again, we've talked about a lot, that data supply chain requires the collection, the transformation, the syndication, and the enrichment of the data. And in order to achieve that, you need solutions like a tag manager, an API gateway, a customer data platform, and analytics or cloud solutions. And those are the pieces of your technical stack, and they're going to be independent of your activation layer or your applications that you as a marketer or you as an analytics person are familiar with working with. Now, part of the data supply chain is figuring out who a user is, which is focused on identity resolution. Because this may be a new concept for some of you, I wanted to spend a couple minutes discussing in more detail given the importance that it plays. So think about identity resolution as the process of integrating the following. The first is the identifiers that become available about that user across the different touch points and devices that they're interacting. And then the second is the behavioral, the transaction, and the contextual information that helps you understand them at the business perspective and making that information or the profile available for marketing, orchestration, and delivery. Now, it's important for organizations to think about identity when they need to correlate that identity stage to the customer funnel or journey. Meaning we have this linear path of our customer journey from awareness all the way to loyalty. And along the way, we can match up what the identity process is. So awareness is associated with the anonymous data that we're building up about that individual. And as we go further and further across that funnel or our customer journey, we're going to know more and more information to up until the point that they become a customer. Meaning, again, in this view, there's a different piece that we start to build up to further understand who this person is and understand more about them. And this understanding is really realized through the collection of unique visitor IDs that start to present themselves in these various interactions. So for example, when you're an anonymous visitor in your customer journey, we can leverage things like third-party cookies or identity pool IDs. But as you start to become known, this is where things like first-party cookies, device IDs, and sessions become present. And as we go further and further down this path, we get to a point where we know very explicitly customer ID, address, phone, membership number, etc. And so what this allows us to do with these identifiers available across the funnel is you as an organization can align the channels and more importantly the corresponding technologies, which is key to improving those in the moment customer experiences. And so ultimately, what this does is the identity resolution made possible with the data supply chain provides you as an organization the platform to move from this mass messaging, right, when everybody's just anonymous or unknown to you, all the way to this desired one-to-one messaging. So with that said, let's go ahead and round out the second part of our webinar where we've talked about the data supply chain and identity resolution with one final recap. So as an organization, you need the following. One, to establish a company-wide data layer strategy where all data is collected and follows a standard nomenclature. Really standardizing the data definitions your organization is using so every team and channel and system is defining the data the same way. The second is integrating a data collection footprint across every single customer touchpoint, including web, mobile, CRM, point of sale, call center, kiosk, and really anywhere else that customer data is created. Again, we spent some time talking about the online and the offline experiences and how important it is to really utilize those to understanding the customer engagement. The third is leveraging real-time solutions that connects enterprise applications, collecting, correlating, stitching, and enriching data in flight, then rather after the fact. And this is really consolidating data in one place, which makes that identity resolution possible. And it serves as the key piece to understanding who that person is at any moment and improving those in the moment experiences. Next is creating rules within the solution that will make decisions about when to trigger syndication across the entire MarTech stack. And again, this is your organization's business logic, defining elements that are important to success, growth, and improved customer experience, and having them all centralized to systems and tools to ensure that they're working off the same visitor data set and what that means to the business. And this last one is more for the data teams. We need to simultaneously sync the data into the data warehouse and/or a data lake. If the data supply chain syndicates data to vendors, it's important to really know that the same data can be syndicated internally, helping to generate new business intelligence that feeds back into that virtuous cycle that we talked about earlier. So we've spent a good amount of time talking about the data supply chain. Now we're going to dive deeper into how the capabilities, which were the collection, the standardization, the enrichment, and the syndication that are required for the data supply chain, equate to data orchestration as a whole. So let's do a recap of what data orchestration is. Again, when an organization achieves data orchestration, they achieve the in-the-moment data on all devices across all channels and technologies. Now, why is this such an important concept? Well, because it helps to drive those desired customer experiences, right? For the visitor at any point in time in which they're at in their customer journey. And this really works towards satisfying those growing expectations that we talked about earlier. So let's talk about these customer journeys. So here we have a customer journey for visitor X. And let's say they engage with your organization, and over time we start to understand more and more information about who they are and their behavior. Now we have customer journey for visitor Y. Again, same concept. They engage with your business. We start to understand more and more about who they are and their behavior. Now, we talked about identity resolution and how that is really helping you understand who the individual is throughout the centralization of the data and the breadcrumbs coming together to help enable the identity resolution process, which, by the way, is a dynamic and ongoing process. So for example, I may start to only be able to collect an email address, but over time I may add in email, customer ID, IDFA, cookie, phone number, etc. And because of the identity resolution, we're now able to know that visitor X and visitor Y is really Alicia. And we've really stitched together her experiences across the desktop and mobile devices. And more importantly, through the centralization of data, we can appropriately enrich her profile and accurately define who she is to the business. In this case, it would be that she's a desktop browser, she loves a good sale, she converts on mobile, and she has a lifetime value of $1,000. And really only after we define who Alicia is to the business and enrich her visitor profile do we deal with the channel activation. The data orchestration is really allowing us to syndicate the data about Alicia across the board, right? So here we're syndicating this profile of Alicia and the enrichments we've done about her through these two experiences out across Optimizely, out across Marketo, out across Facebook, and out across Google. And from there, we're letting those technologies in your organization's stack really choose when and where to insert themselves into the customer's journey. So, what their goal is to provide the best experience at any point in time. Now, the reality, though, is that you have to consider people do not follow linear journeys. And I know this is a bummer to hear, and our jobs would be far easier, but it's just not the reality. And we can't speak at people telling them where and what they should be doing. Instead, we have to account for the fact that their journey is nonlinear. And Alicia is different and is at different stages with different definitions across these different experiences. And that's the world in which we work and live in. So, what you have to do as an organization is really try and get as close to possible to who Alicia is at that moment in time, or in this case, the specific node in our diagram here, to make sure whatever data you do have about her is the same everywhere, right? We're syndicating it out. So, this orchestration as a whole enables in the moment data, and it allows you to realize the full potential of your stack as it exists today. But I also want to point out, as it may change in the future, right? We can just plug and play in different vendors and continue to pipe out or syndicate this data over to them. So, you're really changing your mentality to think about data and profile enrichment first, and then the syndication, which leads to the activation second. So, getting back to the last part of our webinar, this is why we really think the campaign orchestration isn't a real thing, because people are not following these linear paths and you don't know what the next vendor is. And furthermore, it's better to let the vendor make the decisioning versus forcing them into a box that they don't want to be in. So let's go ahead and dive into the comparison around data orchestration and campaign orchestration in more detail. So again, data orchestration is enabling that consistent customer data across channels. It's resulting in a real-time shared view of your customer. That's really enabling those downstream activation tools to provide those in-the-moment experiences. It's allowing you as an organization to realize the full potential of any vendor that you work with. And lastly, it results in teams continually optimizing the channel, the message, and the tool. Where on the flip side, campaign orchestration really pushes for the centralization of data and channel activation decisions. They want one system or tool to be able to handle all of that. And what this does is it limits the use of the vendors that you purchase and the really valid reasons for why you purchase them due to running into feature clashes. It also requires teams to coordinate versus optimize. So I work with a lot of enterprise organizations, and it's really unrealistic to think about how we can get everybody at those large organizations into a room to coordinate these campaigns. It's just not feasible, right? Sometimes you go into meetings and people are meeting each other for the first time. And lastly, the expectation is that you can design campaigns for every linear journey versus the in-the-moment experiences. And even if you do start to account for more of a complex journey, it starts to expose how complicated these systems and tools become in building those out. So really, those are the fundamental differences between the two concepts, which we hope you now have a better understanding. And with that said, I want to open it up for a few questions. All right, the first question is, who operates or controls the data supply chain? So this is really a great question when you're starting to focus on the data initiative. I personally have seen this really vary a lot across different organizations that I speak with. Sometimes the smaller organizations may have individuals who wear many hats. So depending on their capabilities, they may run both the analytics and the marketing side of things, and then be capable of also owning the supply chain conversation. On the flip side, I do spend more time working with enterprise organizations, and more often, I am seeing the owner of the data supply chain fall into the analytics category. And so I would say that's the first piece. However, if an enterprise organization has a current digital transformation or a center of excellence, there may be a number of different departments coming together, really working towards making that supply chain a reality and having different responsibilities throughout the process. So the second question is, do you see this profiling as a master record? How does it work with the CRM? So the profiling is creating a master record where identity resolution has the appropriate breadcrumbs we discussed earlier, and that master record continues to become further and further enriched. So in my opinion, we have a master record based on what is known about that visitor at the point in time you need to provide the in the moment experience. I may personally, if you haven't been able to stitch my profiles together, I may personally have three profiles in a system, but based on what you know about me for those profiles, you can provide the most relevant experience, with the goal ultimately being to stitch all of those three profiles together. So, as this record continues to grow and grow over time, again, as more breadcrumbs become available and the data syndicated out, one example of a system that the data is syndicated to could be a CRM. And that CRM will act as the long term storage for that customer data, whereas a customer data platform, which would be one piece of the data supply chain, is more about providing that marketing database available for enrichment and syndication across an organization's stack, really compared to storing every single historical piece of information for, eternity for that individual. And the same thing holds true really when you think about the need for an enterprise data warehouse. You'd still want to retain that information and store it in a solution that's going to be your long-term storage. So the third question is, we haven't really defined a data supply chain and don't have a data layer strategy in place. How can we learn more about that and what exactly that consists of? How can we get started creating one? So I'd first say that Telium does a great job of writing educational blog posts, some of which cover off these or talk about these introductory topics like what a data supply chain is or what a data layer is. I'd recommend visiting some of those and reading those as a starting point. However, for your internal conversations, I think it's really good to start asking questions. So, taking a look to see, does your organization have a data layer? If they do, who owns that data layer and who typically handles implementations or integration work? Once you figure out the answer to those questions, you can start to assess how you have or haven't been able to use the data layer today, and if it's accounting for the data from all those customer experiences that you're trying to utilize. So a quick review and audit of how this is all being leveraged is always a good place to start in my mind, and can really help you identify any sort of gaps and opportunities for improvement. Now, if your organization is not using a data layer, then you may want to discuss why and understand the barriers to getting one in place up until this point in time. When others in the organizations are aware of really these benefits of having a well-defined data layer and data supply chain, it can really help to prioritize projects and get others excited on how these initiatives could positively impact their role. Sometimes it's just a matter of being the one to educate others. So in my mind, again, the biggest thing is to continue to have those open conversations within your organization and constantly look to educate and make others aware about this stuff. So lastly, where can I find more information on data orchestration and how Telium's solution can help achieve that? So really, I would say check out Telium.com. We have a lot of educational white papers and videos talking about the various technical components that help to enable the data supply chain. It's a great resource, and again, there's always an opportunity for you to talk directly with Telium from the website. And with that said, thank you guys again for everyone's time today. I hope you have found this webinar helpful and have a better understanding of how that data supply chain can enable data orchestration to really provide better customer experiences based on that stateful data being known about individuals at any point in time in their customer journey.